Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Hi, I'm Zach Waters, and welcome to another episode of WTF-STOP Photo Talk, where I chat to photographers about their life and connection to the world through photography. Today's guest is editorial photographer Syd Shelton. Syd's journey as a photographer has been his way of expressing his political interest. He's wanted to ask questions, he's wanted to raise awareness with his work, whether it was working on Aboriginal projects in Australia or his long association with Rock Against Racism. We look back right at the beginning, his art school days as a painter, right through to his graphic design work and how that played an important part of his life as a photographer. We discussed a number of his publishing projects, in particular his book The Falls, published by Fistful of Books, which documents his time in Northern Ireland covering the Troubles.
But I did go twice, and I went on that long journey up to Scotland and from Stranraer to Larne Ferry and then the train to Belfast. And I had no money at that time. All my money went on film. And I think I took probably 20 rolls of film in total on both journeys. But I wanted to go along and photograph in Republican areas because that was where the venom of the anti-Irish racism was really directed. They were being vilified. People, Republican people and people of West Belfast were being demonised in this country as being absolutely evil.
We went right back to the beginning and talked about his time working with the Aboriginal community in Australia.
New South Wales Builders Labourers Federation, which I'd done photographs of quite a bit, were getting involved in trying to force the Labour government's, Whitlam government, into transforming a whole block of houses, terrace houses, into a housing cooperative for urban Aboriginal people. And they were successful. But I went down there. I think I was the only photographer who ever went down there and photographed these people and who lived there.
And then, of course, we had to talk about the Clash and Rock Against Racism.
Bernie Rhodes rang us up and said, look, my boys want to do it. Can we have a chat? So they came round to Red's studio and Red and I met with them, the whole of the Clash, and they were totally up for it. But Bernie was on another planet, I tell you. He was going, well, I'll let my boys do it if you use the money you make to buy a tank for Zimbabwe.
So the day came, and I was really excited to have a chat with him and sit down and chew some cud. And it was quite a funny interview. A few things happened, but you'll find out as you listen. So the day came, and I asked him what he was up to.
Oh, God, so many things I'm up to, as usual, apart from chopping wood this morning. But apart from that, I'm working at the moment in doing the promotional work for the second edition of my book, Syd Shelton, Rock Against Racism, which is a book which we first published in 2015 by Autograph in Shoreditch.
Yeah.
It was then picked up by an American music producer who loved the book and had found one and said, "Look, I'd love to publish one. It publishes in America." And he got in touch with a publisher called Rare Bird Books in Los Angeles. And they jumped at the opportunity. We had a couple of Zoom meetings, and suddenly the show was on the road for a worldwide distribution of the book, not just in America, but everywhere, and which is being launched around now. Apparently, its official publication date in England is the 9th of March, but there are copies already getting into the shops and into people's houses. And we're doing it tomorrow, a book signing at the Lucy Bell Gallery in St. Leonard's. It's a book which is about 5 years of my life, which were perhaps the most important and certainly the most exciting in some ways years of my life. And that was from 1976 to 1981. I'd been living for 4 years and working as a photojournalist and graphic designer, but mostly as a photojournalist doing documentary photography in Australia for 4.5 years, I think. And I came back to London in 1986. No, 76, sorry, not 86, 1976. And things had changed in those few years that I'd been away. Things had really deteriorated. The first major recession since the Second World War was suddenly getting a grip on life in Britain, and austerity, which we're still suffering from, which was in its infancy. The Callaghan Labour government was imposing massive cuts at the behest of the International Monetary Fund, who would only finance the government providing they did install these cuts. And it meant that scapegoating was rife, and the growth of an openly fascist party in the form of the National Front was terrifying in many ways, and they were putting marches through multicultural areas of Britain every weekend. Racist murders were suddenly on the massive increase, and this was at a time when we only had 2 TV channels, and the main one, BBC One, the main Saturday night show was the black and white minstrel show, which everybody watched because there was only 2 channels. You couldn't go to Netflix or find another channel somewhere else in the multitude of channels that we now all have. So racism was becoming normalised.
Love thy neighbour.
Love thy neighbour, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and racism was becoming absolutely normalised. It was becoming quite legitimate for comedians to use black people, Irish people, Roma people, gay people as the butt of dumb jokes, and it really was quite frightening. Around this time, I thought a great guitarist and musician, Eric Clapton, who we'd all been fans of, made the most incredible, outrageous, racist rant at his concert in Birmingham. And Reg Saunders, who's another photographer and a lifelong friend of mine, he, and together with other people, wrote this fantastic letter after this outburst. I actually read about this outburst of Eric Clapton's, calling for a rank-and-file movement called Rock Against Racism. The response was just phenomenal. There were hundreds and hundreds of people wrote to the original signatories of this letter, saying, "Yeah, we're up for it. We want to be part of this. It's a great idea. We really we like it." And the show was immediately on the road, if you see what I mean. I got involved shortly after that. I wasn't a signatory to the letter because I wasn't even in the country, but I did get. I've just been handed a cup of coffee. Thank you very much.
We always cater for snacks on this show. If anybody's listening to this, Syd's getting a cup of coffee, and I'm having a cup of tea. But I've had to make my tea. He's getting his delivered into his studio. Wow. We're having a tea break now.
I met Red in those early days, and we became, as I say, we became friends and have remained friends to this day. He was an extraordinary, dynamic man with also a very successful photographer working for the Sunday Times. And he had this, I thought, for a working class lad from Pontefract, he had an insight into the most glamorous world of photography, because he shared a studio with Gerard Mankiewicz, who did just about every record sleeve that anybody could afford to have done, and also took the famous pictures of Jimi Hendrix, one of which we've got in our living room. And they had this studio in an old boxing ring in Great Windmill Street in Soho. And to me, this was just magic. And we had our Rock Against Racism meetings in that studio. And sometimes there'd be sets of, I always remember the set for Kate Bush's, I think, is it Lionheart, that album. But we actually had the meeting in that set. It was completely crazy, but it was exciting as well. I mean, but we really decided that we wanted to do something, but something which was creative, not just protest marches and demonstrations. However, the big turning point in that story, which all of which is recorded in the book in photographs, it was in 1977 in South London, in Lewisham and New Cross, and the police raided 21 houses in May in Lewisham and New Cross, and arrested 21 young people, the youngest of which was 14, on suspicion of being muggers, which was that was the bogey word then, was muggers. It was every young black lad in particular, but sometimes girls as well, were potentially muggers. And they were criminalised by the Metropolitan Police and the Daily Mail, of course, and the Evening Standard. This led to a fantastic campaign by people in Lewisham and New Cross, and for the defence of the Lewisham 21, as they became known.
Yeah.
The National Front, the Fascist National Front, organised a very, very provocative march for the 13th of August of that year to go through Lewisham and New Cross. And this was the trigger for a massive counter-demonstration. But it was also a trigger for the police to have a go, because they really wanted to crush that community. And they employed the quarter of the entire Metropolitan Police and their entire cavalry division. So every horse they had in London came that day. They came to teach people a lesson. There was no doubt about that.
Yeah.
The National Front were allowed to march, and they forced a way through with the police horses, but they were bussed out of the area very quickly. And the real battle of Lewisham on that day was the battle between the local youth, people from all over the country as well, who came and actually fought with the police for something like 7 hours. And the police responded by using riot shields for the first time in mainland Britain. And there was, I think, 700 people arrested, huge numbers of people with injuries. And it was an extraordinary battle. But in a way, it was a victory too, because the local people of Lewisham and New Cross and the people who came from all over the country weren't going to sit down and take it. They really had enough. It was the day of reckoning, I think you could best describe it. And the important thing as well for it, the movement of Rock Against Racism, was that after that, a mixture of people from the Labour Party, the Socialist Workers' Party, trade unions, football managers came together to form the Anti-Nazi League, which was a group specifically designed to counter the National Front, and particularly at the ballot box. Remembering in some parts of London, for example, in Tower Hamlets, they'd been getting 17% of the vote. This is an openly fascist party whose slogan was, if they're white, they're all right. If they're black, send them back. This was a serious situation. People were getting killed. Altab Ali was murdered in Brick Lane, and other Asian murders took place, all at the same time in 1977 and 78. We decided that as a result of the formation of the Anti-Nazi League, this was an organisation which had much more clout than we did in Rock Against Racism, in the sense that they had financial support, because they had the trade union movement, the Labour Party, and so on, who could actually muster serious resources. And we decided we wanted to put on an event, which we borrowed the title from the Notting Hill Carnival, which we called a carnival. But we didn't want it to be a demonstration as such. We wanted it to be an all-day party which took over the whole of London. And it turned out to be, people said that when we started building the stage in Victoria Park, where in the borough of Tower Hamlets, where the National Front had done so well, they said, you'd be lucky if you get 20,000. People will just go straight to the park as well. They won't want to march 7.5 miles. It turned out I was in charge of Rock Against Racism in Trafalgar Square, because I lived in Charing Cross Road, so it was easy for me to walk down there. And by 8 o'clock in the morning, there was 10,000 people already in the square, and it swelled to about 100,000 people. And it was a day-long party. We had bands on trucks, stilt men, bands like the Ruts, the Piranhas, the Mekons, Misty and Roots, all on the back of flatbed trucks. So people were dancing and partying throughout all the streets of London. And things like Virgin Records gave us 500,000 whistles, which we threw out from the trucks. So the noise was absolutely deafening. And it was exciting. It was a wonderful 7-mile long party. When in the build-up to the carnival, the original bands were Tom Robinson Band, X-Ray Specs and Steel Pulse. A week, I think, or maybe 10 days or so before the carnival, which was already building a momentum, Bernie Rhodes rang us up and said, look, my boys want to do it. And look, can we have a chat? So they came round to Red's studio, and Red and I met with them, the whole of the Clash, and they were totally up for it. But Bernie was on another planet, I tell you. He was going, well, I'll let my boys do it if you use the money you make to buy a tank for Zimbabwe. We went, buy a tank? What are you talking about, Bernie? There's no money involved in this. Nobody's getting paid. We're doing this because we believe in it, not because we're making any money. And the Clash just overrode him and said, look, we're doing it. And that was a game changer because the Clash were the hottest band in the country at that time. And once word got out, they weren't on any of the posters or the flyers or advanced publicity that we'd put out at all. But the word went, I don't know how it went out, but everybody knew the Clash were going to play. And they really were the hottest band in town. And it was an extraordinary day. The day after that day,
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
The Greater London Council elections were held and the National Front went down from 17% to 0.5%, which was, I don't know how much we can credit that to the Rock Against Racism Carnival, but I think we can credit it to the fact that there was a significant and very vocal opposition to them, and people were starting to be being made aware that they were actually Nazis.
Yeah. Talk about that, what is it, adventure, escapade, big part of your life was all encapsulated in the book, Rock Against Racism, but you can see it broken down quite a bit in your Cafe Royal books.
Yes.
Well, you've got the street portraits, the Battle of Lewisham, street portraits too, and Rock Against Racism. So I presume crowds as well. A lot of that is broken down elements of Rock Against Racism, your journey through that period, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely it is. And a lot of those
Cafe
Royal books are in the in the Rock Against Racism book.
Yeah.
It's just put together as a more coherent narrative, whereas the Cafe Royal book are much more about individual photographs in a way. There's another one coming out soon, another Street Portrait 3 is coming out.
Right. And is that around East End, is it?
It's all over the place, actually. Some are in Los Angeles, some are in Australia, some are in Ireland, some are in West Belfast, which is another book which I had. There's 2 books on there's a Cafe Royal book on West Belfast, but there's also a book which is done by
Fistful of Books?
Fistful of Books called The Falls, which is about the falls in West Belfast.
Well, I want to get onto that. Actually, I'll tell you about the falls. I'll tell you the story about the falls. And then I'm going to ask you how it all began. And then we can work our way down to the falls, because I'm intrigued with your Sydney shoots and your Belfast stuff. But I had a copy of the Fistful of Books Falls last year. It's a flat lay book. It's absolutely beautiful. And I haven't got a copy of it now. I had a copy, and I was with Simon, who published it, and I had it in my hand.
Lovely guy.
Yeah, he is. And I was in Manchester, but I was also with Colin Wilkinson, who's the head honcho at Blue Core Press. So I was with Colin, and Colin had a couple of boxes of used books. And on one hand, I had Simon saying, I will get the Falls Syd's book. But Colin was going to me, he had this box of books, and he was going, do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want that? Do you want that? Because he's like me dad, Colin. And in that box, he was sort of saying there was like Killips in there. There was all sorts of stuff. And I kept saying, oh yeah, I'll have that. And I'm in Manchester, and I live on the south coast of England. So eventually I had like this pile of books I couldn't carry. And then I said to Simon, I went, keep Syd's book for now. I said, because I can't take any more. Colin's going to kill me. He's given me so many books. So that's the only reason I haven't got a copy. But I thought that was beautifully. Simon's done a really good job on that book. And you can buy that book
really
on the Fistful of Books website. And I'll put a link for that, because £20, because your signed editions have all been sold out.
Yeah.
For £20, it's well worth the buy. It's so really good.
Yeah, I was well pleased with it, and it was a real pleasure working with him.
He's a good man. He's a good man. I've worked with him. I had a book, a couple of projects published with him. Tell me where it all began. You were born in Pontefract?
Yeah, I was. I was born a working class household in Pontefract. I suppose I always felt cheated that I went to a secondary modern school, because I failed my 11 plus, partly because I'm a bit lexic. I can't even say the word, and I couldn't spell at all, but and still can't. In those days, we were all streamed, and people who were good with their hands, which I was, destined to go to either Pollard Bearings, which was an engineering factory, or go down the pit, the mines. And I was determined. My dad wasn't a miner. My dad was originally a cabinet maker, but ended up being a postman, and they were determined I weren't going to go down the mines. But my dream was always to go to art school. And really, that was quite a radical thing to do. And art schools were very different in those days. You went there when you were 16 years old, and I did. I went when I was 16. It really changed my life. It was my dream was to go to art school. And it really, I loved the fact that I could do painting and sculpture and and I stayed there for 5 years.
You're 16, 15, 14, 13, up north, because I was brought up not far from you. Where did the love of art come from?
As a child, I always loved drawing and making things. That was my obsession, making models, model aeroplanes, model villages, and drawing. And drawing was really if I could get a brand new drawing book. I mean, we didn't have, like, I'm sure those days, in 1950s, there was not much money around at all. And so, I'd draw on all sorts of scraps of paper, backs of envelopes, or whatever I could get was a white sheet of paper. I don't know. I had a twin, sadly he died 8 years ago now, but I had a twin brother, and he had no real, he didn't have any interest in drawing at and painting at all, but it was my obsession. And he also was very, let me put it this way, he had a lot of ill health when he was a kid, and he spent quite a bit of time in hospital. I used to spend a lot of time on my own, because my parents were looking after him and seeing to him, going to see him in hospital and so on. And my grandmother lived next door but one, so I was always safe in the house, but I did and that's when I really started getting into drawing and art. It was what made my heart beat. Still does, really. I mean, I still, that's exactly where where my passion lies.
Yeah.
When I left art school, the first thing I did was, and this is quite crazy in a way, is came to London. I went to London. I'm no longer in London, but I went to London with, I think, 40 quid I'd saved up in my pocket. And I stayed for a while with my mother's sister and auntie, who gave me accommodation, and I got bits of work. I worked in a hotel for a while, cleaning in the kitchen and so on, just really crap jobs. But then I walked into St. Martin's in Charing Cross Road, which you could do in those days without going through any security. And I went to see, I don't know how I got the gall to do it, see Freddie Gore, who was head of painting. And I told him my story of how where I'd come from and what I'd done. And I said, is there any teaching work? And he said, no. But he said, we are looking for a technician. And he gave me the job of technician in the painting department, which I stayed and did for 3 years.
So you were about 23 here, were you?
Yeah, I was about 21 when I went there, say 21 or 2, and I stayed till I was about 25, say, yeah.
Yeah, so you went from Wakefield to London to St. Martin's, yeah.
And I ended up finding a place to live, which was quite an eccentric man who was actually professor of psychology at the Open University. And he put an advert in the Times, of all places, which my auntie spotted. And it said, I remember it really well, it said, single room vacant November 12th. His Nibs, who lives on premises, being short on good nature himself, welcomes the sunny side in others. And I thought, this is actually quite intriguing. And I I phoned him up and went round, and it was great. I lived there for all of those 3 years. I then decided I wanted to do something else, and it was being a technician at St. Martin's was fantastic, and I was not much older than the students, so my friends tended to be older students, and we got on really well. And Soho was a fantastic place in those days. It was really, in Charing Cross Road, and Patisserie Valerie was our local where we'd go and have coffee, but where there was only that one Patisserie Valerie in Old Compton.
And were you taking pictures at all?
No, I wasn't taking pictures. I was doing paintings which were hard edge paintings, a little bit like Frank Stella, if you like.
No.
Very graphic, very abstract, and it started to worry me because I was becoming more political, more involved in daily life, and yet my art was somehow or other a bit removed, more ivory tower. And I remember meeting, who used to come and have a cup of tea, Joseph Kadulka, used to come into St. Martin's, and we'd always sit and have a cup of tea. And he showed me a lot of his work, and I was very much influenced by his work at that time. I thought it was absolutely wonderful. And he was a lovely man. I haven't seen him for 50 years, probably, and however long ago that was. I decided I wanted to travel and I wanted to do something different. And I went off to Southeast Asia and ended up in Sydney in Australia, where I knew some people and found somewhere to live quite quickly.
I thought you might have been a £10 pom.
No. I didn't go till then. But you could. There was no immigration problems then. You could work and you could go there. And that's when I bought my first camera, which I'll show you. I still got it.
So he's off to find his camera, but he doesn't realise that you can't see it.
It's this is the first camera I bought.
Can you explain it? Because nobody can see that. It's a Nikkomat, isn't it? What's that lens? 50
it's a
mil?
Nikkomat. Yeah, it's with a 50mm 1.4 lens, and it was really, in some ways, a poor man's Nikon F. The Nikon F was like absolute, built like a tank, and the most professional camera. The Nikkomat had the same lenses, and the quality of the images was just as good. In fact, it's identical, but it was a cheaper version, and I certainly couldn't have afforded a Nikon F at that time. But it was actually, it's still, what's amazing, it still works. It's 50 odd years old, and it still works.
It looks a good nick.
Yeah, it's scratched and battered a bit, and it's certainly covered in dust at the moment. I haven't dusted it for a while, but I have most of the cameras I've ever owned still. There's too many memories in them that I just wouldn't ever, and they're not worth anything anyway, really. So I'd never get rid of them. But
was that a 50mm lens I saw?
Yeah, it's a 50mm 1.8 actually. It is that one. What's on there? I don't think that's the original lens. I think that's a more modern lens. I will have the original lens It's not on there for some reason. I think it's on one of my other Nikons. What happened was quite extraordinary because we were talking about the story of Australian pictures. And one of the first stories that I did was I went to Redfern, which I've just put something up on Instagram about those pictures from Redfern, which was an area where urban Aboriginal people lived. And the New South Wales Builders Labourers Federation, which I had done photographs of quite a bit, were getting involved in trying to force the Labour government, Whitlam government, into transforming a whole block of houses, terrace houses, into a housing cooperative for urban Aboriginal people. And they were successful. But I went down there. I think I was the only photographer who ever went down there and photographed these people and who lived there. I didn't do thousands of pictures. I did a few, and mostly quite. I realized that I wasn't really a classic documentary photographer. I was somewhere between a documentary photographer and a studio photographer. I like to set portraits up.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because I look at that work and you shot a lot of verticals at the time.
Yeah, I did.
I can see that in that studio style in there with them verticals, but that's not a bad thing. It's just like I noticed there was a lot of verticals on there. Do you think them Sydney shots was the beginning of your quest to sort of find answers to things, which you were sort of
Absolutely
suffering with it earlier on at St Martin's?
Yeah, it was. That's where as Carol Tulloch said in I think in the introduction to the Rock Against Racism book, that's where I honed my activist eye, if you know what I mean. And I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
The great story about that was that I really, those photographs, I printed up about a dozen of them. I thought, what am I going to do with these? And if a friend of mine who was an academic, really, but he also did some journalism, wrote a story about it called Black Redfern. And we sent it off to this magazine, which was a weekly magazine in A3 format called Nation Review, which was a bit like the Sunday Times colour supplement was at that time.
Yeah.
It was a very liberal, but widely read because of it, and very visual. I thought, oh, they won't be, I don't know whether they'll pick them up or not, but they sent a telegram the next day and said, great story, great pictures using this week. And they did 4 double-page spreads and the cover. And that was my first published work. And it made such a huge difference. How suddenly people...
How much you get paid?
Oh, probably about 70 quid. It was not a lot.
What, in 73? 4?
Or 70.
That was quite a bit of money then.
Yeah, it was. It was, and it really, I couldn't believe that I could then start to make a living as taking photographs, which I did. But that was perhaps my fondest memory, because it was, I'd really, working class imposter syndrome. You just don't think, you think, oh yeah, but if I show them, they'll just say, oh no, these are rubbish.
I think a lot of photographers suffer with that.
I still have that fear when I publish things that people are going to laugh.
But I think we also have a sort of an affinity with our subject matter as well.
Yeah, well, that's the important thing for me. I don't want to criticise other photographers, but I really don't like that sort of photography which takes the piss of working class people.
Yeah.
My work is very much about empathy with the subjects and the people I photograph. And I'm very conscious of that. It's really important to me.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
So you're working with the likes of Nation Review and you were becoming a working photographer. What film camera did you use then? Were you changing your cameras or were you still working with your Nikon?
Mostly I used the Nikon, and I also had another Nikon. I can't remember what it was. Would it been an FN or I can't remember. I haven't got that one. But somewhere between the Nikon and my F3s, which were the cameras that I used for years and years and years and still have.
Yeah.
There were other Nikons, and I can't remember. I know I had an FE at one point.
An FM2?
But there was a mechanical one, not an electronic one, which I also had.
Like with a silver edge, silver casing on it.
Yeah, maybe that was what it was, yeah.
I think it's an FM2.
Yeah, that's it. And a silver, yeah. Yeah, and I always carried two cameras because so you didn't have to change lenses so often. In fact, now I often look back, I've still got all those cameras. How I used to walk around with sort of two Nikons, 5 lenses, a flash unit, and loads of film. No, it's surprising I'm not totally lopsided, or not just me, any of us photographers who carried around all that gear, because it was so heavy. I can't believe it.
You did a few years in Sydney and Australia. What brought you back to the UK?
I missed things like the music scene in England. I missed football. When you've been brought up in one particular culture, you miss the references to things like television programs. You miss all those things which have become part of you over the 25 or 23 or whatever it was years that in your formative period. And after a while, I became tired of Australia's Philistinism sometimes. I mean, it's changed immensely now, I know. But at that time, there was, photography and art were not really taken very seriously. But I did put together an exhibition at the Sydney Film-makers called Working Class Heroes, which was really well received. But it was time to come back. That's all I can say. It was the right time to come back.
So you said you miss football.
Yeah.
Who's your team?
Manchester United.
Oh, yeah. You come from Leeds and you support Manchester United. That's so obvious, isn't it?
Of course. Well, I don't come from Leeds, but Pontefract, but near Leeds. No, I never liked Leeds.
Hang about, were Manchester United very good in the 70s?
No, not that good, no.
You live down in the South Coast now, so that's classic territory for Manchester United supporters.
Absolutely. I don't go very often nowadays, I must say.
Back in London, graphic design was becoming a big part of your life again, wasn't it? Your art was coming in.
Yeah. And I think one of the things what really got me is that I really got annoyed about the way in which my photographs were used on the page sometimes, and I wanted to control that a little bit more. And that's what got me back into graphics. But I also always have had a love of typography. And so the two combined, and I really loved working where I would do everything. We'd do the graphics and the photography. And a good example of that was I did with Red Saunders in the 80s, in 1984 and 85, a series of photographic books called A Day in the Life of Books.
You did Northern Ireland and you did London, didn't you, with them series?
Yeah, and we did Los Angeles.
That was an accumulation of different photographers and your own work as well, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, we brought 100, like for the London book, we brought 100 photographers from all over the world, but also we left 20 places for people who nobody had ever heard of, and that would include students or whatever, people who came along. We looked at hundreds and hundreds of portfolios, and we made eventually the selection of the 100 photographers. I mean, they were from living legends like Andre Curtez, Don McCullum, William Klein, to Sally Soames, to people, as I say, nobody had ever heard of. And we sent them out to different locations, decided locations. Like, for example, we sent O. Winston Link to photograph Concord. And to different places, we mixed it up. We put advertising photographers in the sewers. We put documentary photographers in advertising, what would normally be advertising type situations. But I also was one of the photographers, and that was quite an incredibly nerve-wracking thing to think you're going out for 24 hours, you've got to photograph for 24 hours, and we're going to blind edit this book, and Bruce Bernard, who was picture editor at the Sunday Times, was going to edit it. You're going to have to really sharpen your brain to get some pictures, to get anything in the book. And fortunately, it was a good day for me. Some people didn't have a good day. Like, I remember, I've forgotten his name, a French photographer who died recently, sent me a postcard saying, "I'm not giving you the film. I didn't have a good day at all."
Jean Gourmet?
No, Harry Grier.
Harry Grier. Who was your influences photographically here? Who was really inspiring you?
William Klein was certainly one of my influences, and Don McCullum, of course. Paul Strand, all the classics, really, like most of us, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I also learned a lot from people around me, people who were friends, people like Peter Lavery, Red Saunders, who taught me about using flash and mixing light. A lot of influences which you tend to overlook from your actual peers, which was really important for me too.
How about Harry Grier still alive? Do you mean Klein died recently, didn't he? Klein died recently.
Is he?
Sorry, Harry.
Oh, yeah, he did, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Harry.
Oh, it's brilliant.
Harry Grier is a beautiful, I mean, his work is amazing. I think Klein died recently, didn't he? Yeah. William Klein died recently, yeah. Harry's still very much in kick. He's about in his 80s now.
Wow. Oh, that's fantastic.
This 70s to the early 80s was a massive change for you, wasn't it? This was when your whole racism journey took on its sort of, what you just were talking about earlier. This is when it all sort of started kicking in.
It is.
This period, we've covered some of the stuff you did with the Lewisham riots and the stuff with the protests, because that was a big feature of a lot of your work throughout the years. But one thing you did, which I was really jealous of, is you went on the militant tours.
Yes.
You were shooting The Clash and Sham 69s, all of these bands, man. What was that like? What was it like hanging out with The Clash and stuff like that?
It was brilliant. It was absolutely fantastic. All the bands, we never ever remember having an argument with any of them. They all got stuck in, you know, when we'd be unloading the PA, they'd be, Malcolm Owen would be on one end of the box and I'd be on the other, you know. There was a great camaraderie between the bands and the organisers, and it was fantastic. We did a gig which I did a lot of pictures on that night because it was a very visual evening, West Runton Pavilion in 1979, and the bands were the Gang of Four, the Ruts, and the Misty and Roots.
Yeah.
We arrived there. It's a long drive from London. I remember I drove an old combi van full of PA gear and copies of Temporary Hoarding, the magazine that we used to put together. We got there, and it was this massive, great shed close to the beach, the West Runton Pavilion, which is long gone now. When we got there, and there was nobody there at all. And all the other gigs that we'd done up to there, with two previous ones, Cambridge and Leicester, there were huge queues when we arrived outside the venue. But there was nobody at this one. And nobody said anything. We put the PA in, the bands did their sound checks, and there's still nobody there. But nobody dare say, this is the party when no one came, you know, the one that you dreaded. But then suddenly all these double-decker buses came round the headland. When all of the punters came from all the villages all around and from Norwich, and brought a fleet of double-decker buses. And the drivers of the double-decker buses just sat outside and waited for the whole gig for 3 hours or however long it took. And then they all got back in the buses and off they went back to wherever they came from. It was just incredible.
Wow.
That was a great gig. The Guardian do this thing from time to time on a Thursday, I think, my best shot. And I used one of my shots when they did my best shot from that gig of this girl in fishnet tights laying on the stage, which I got up there. I saw her laying there. And you're driven by total adrenaline in those situations. And I had two Nikons, and I think it was a Norman flash I had in those days. And I climbed over everybody's head to get the shots. I knew there was only going to be a second to get it and it'd be gone. And I did get the shot, and then was thrown by the bouncers over the top of everybody and landed on one of my Nikons, which is the Pentaprism, still got a dint from that day. But it was one of those shots, like a lot of shots in years of photography, must remember, especially when we were talking about the days of film, you're never sure whether you'd got it right. Had you got it in focus? Had you got the exposure right? Did the flash burn out, or was it all right? All those worries. And I remember we drove through the night on the way back with the PA, and there was a convoy of vans with Misty, the Ruts. The Gang of Four had gone off to Leeds. They went the other way, but we went on this long all-night convoy, and I went straight to the darkroom and processed the film. And I remember very well smoking, because I used to smoke in those days, I haven't done for a bloody long time now. But smoking as I'm watching the film, just thinking, can I have a look? Can I have a look? Did I get it? It was there. But that anxiety used to be, it was copy. I'm sure you remember it, of focusing on film and waiting to see if you'd actually got the image you thought you had.
You covered the Clash on the Hyde Park gig, didn't you?
No, not Hyde Park. No.
Was that not Hyde Park?
Victoria Park.
The Rock Against... Oh, is that Victoria Park?
Yeah.
Is that the Clash video where they're playing live, which is on YouTube?
Yes.
It's all over YouTube. Is it Victoria Park? I thought it was Hyde Park.
No, that's Victoria.
My bad.
That was the first carnival, at Victoria Park.
So you were on the stage, weren't you? Because you got that... Is it Joe Strummer who you've got?
No, the famous one, I have got one of Joe Strummer, but the famous one is the one of Paul Simonon, the back of him.
Paul Simonon, yeah.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Are you on the video?
No, because what happened was there was a little bit of aggravation over that thing, is that the people who were making that film, Rude Boy, they sort of thought that they owned the stage, and they had some quite heavy guys who cleared us all off the stage so they could get their film done.
Wow.
So when they were filming that, I was back out the front doing pictures. But I got about looking at the contact sheet, which is actually in the book, interesting, the contact sheet from today. I had probably got 4 or 5 shots before I was off the stage.
Wow.
But that was a lucky one that,
and you got that shot. Wow.
But ironically, when you look at that contact sheet, I actually didn't ring that image at all. I overlooked it completely.
How many times have we done that with contact sheets?
Yeah.
It always takes somebody else to look at it and go, you've missed one. Look at that.
And that's exactly what happened. Quite a few years later, someone said, look, this is a fantastic shot. And it's much better than the ones you printed. And they were, of course, it was true.
So going back to Belfast, which you did around 1979, this was in amongst your racism journey or anti-racism journey. You got the Flatley book with Fistful of Books, and there's a Cafe Royal books on the Falls.
Yeah.
You know, when you were in Sydney and you were searching for answers in a way, is that what you were doing going to Belfast?
Exactly. It was a voyage of discovery, very much so. And it was a voyage which I wanted to, at that time, 77 and 70, I went twice, actually, 77 and 79, and I have no idea which pictures are from 77 and which is 79, sadly. So they're just blurring into one. But I did go twice, and I went on that long journey up to Scotland from Stranraer to Larne Ferry, and then the train to Belfast. And I had no money at that time. All my money went on film. And I think I took probably 20 rolls of film in total on both journeys. But I wanted to go along and photograph in Republican areas, because that was where the venom of the anti-Irish racism was really directed. They were being vilified. People, Republican people and people of West Belfast were being demonized in this country as being absolutely evil. I mean, in the same way jihadists are treated nowadays, that everybody was a member of the IRA and everyone was a gunman. But I wanted to try and find out for myself what people were like, but also to put a human face to that inquiry.
Did you have any contacts over there?
I did have contacts. a guy called Jerry Fitzpatrick, who was part of the Troops Out movement. He gave me a series of contacts and people who allowed me to sleep on their floors because I was there for about 5 to 6 days. And I didn't have money for hotels or anything. So I slept on people's floors. But they were all contacts which I wasn't allowed to write down. I had to memorize their addresses and things because obviously the security situation was pretty serious, to say the least.
Quite a ballsy move going over there because it was quite a scary place when you're looking from the outside in.
It was scary, but what was remarkable, and really I'm not exaggerating, is just how incredibly hospitable and kind the people I met were. They were all, the fact that I was a Brit was absolutely not a non-starter. And one of the things I always remember so well was I always wore, in those days, of course, it's in the height of Rock Against Racism badge. And I had quite a few of them in my pocket. And I gave a lot away. And most of the young people I met, were more interested in talking about the bands in England than they were about or Stiff Little Fingers for that matter, than they were talking about the Troubles.
Yeah, because you were the man who's photographing the punk scene at the time. You had a lot of credibility out there.
Yeah, and it did give you credibility. I just walked the streets. I didn't know what to expect when I go around the corner. I did see I didn't want to photograph the Troubles because I felt like everybody else, Chris Steele Perkins, Clive Lumpkin, Don McCullen, were all doing fantastic job of photographing the Troubles. But I wanted to photograph the people, not the Troubles.
Your work has been predominantly black and white, even in Ireland, and there's other stuff you've done. Colours seep through somewhere. And what I've noticed about your colour is you use a bit of flash as well with your colour.
Yeah.
You can sort of see that in some of your black and white as well. Talk about your journey with colour and then how it relates to graphic design work. Because again, a lot of your static colour work is very design-based. The design elements are very much featuring within that.
I think so. I mean, one of the things I'm always a bit obsessive about is that when you place somebody in a background, that you really worry about the background as much as you worry about the person as well.
Yeah.
You are doing a composition, and I do get obsessed about that. But I did start to use flash mostly when I started doing colour work because it enabled you to control the colour a little bit more. But also, I love doing that mixture where you use the ambient light and the flash together.
Yeah.
And I still work with doing that. I still like to use flash as well because it can freeze things. But it's that mixture of the ambience. And or rarely do I use flash just as flash. I use it always as a mix.
What, you're popping it about a stop under, are you?
Yeah, and often with quite slow shutter speed.
Yeah.
So things will move a little bit and you get a bit of smudginess.
I used to shoot a lot like that, more for commercial work and stuff. I'd always, and editorial work for newspapers, I'd always shoot on a slow shutter speed, say at 5.6, and then I would, or 6.7 or 7, whatever, and then I would always have my flash at about f4, 5.6, just to stop or so under.
Yeah.
And it would capture it perfectly. I was intrigued by your colour work because on the surface, you're a black and white man.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21+. Terms and conditions apply.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Yeah.
Underneath that, you're very much a colour graphic design-based photographer and artist as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I am, but sometimes
It's sort of hidden away there underneath it all.
it is. I've always said in my sort of career, I suppose, that some people know me as a graphic designer and some people know me only as a photographer, and not many people know me as both, which is quite interesting. But I've always said that the aesthetic decisions that you make in making pictures, photographs, is exactly the same as laying out a page in a leaflet or a book or a poster or whatever. And you're making the same sort of visual decisions. And it's going back to really art school. And one of the dominant things in art schools when I went to art school was the Bauhaus method of teaching, which was very abstract, but it was very much about sort of arranging two oranges on a black square and working out how that could best be the most dynamic composition. I really think those sort of aesthetic decisions are really the same, whether you're making a photograph or you're making a page. Part of the reason one of the things that I like about the sort of shallow theatrical space, as I call it, which I often use in photographs, where you don't necessarily, I mean, it's not always true, but often don't have much of a background. It's quite, the background is almost like a studio backdrop. I used to like that certainty of certain places where I'd take people to photograph. And one was Hare Row in Cambridge Heath in East London. And because it was underneath the railway viaducts or whatever you call it, going to Cambridge Heath Station, and you could control the light very, very assuredly. You could make it, because you could move somebody to the left, you get more light coming in from that side, or you move them to the right, you get more light coming in from there, but no overhead light. And it was really, I loved that sort of certainty, which meant you could concentrate on getting the relationship between the photographer, the camera, and the person you're photographing to really work. As I've said many times before, sometimes that takes a long time. And sometimes the first shot, and I'm sure you know that in your own practice, it's exactly the same. Sometimes you go along and the first shot you take is absolutely perfect because the person gives you everything because they've not built up that guard. They've not started posing. They've not started being self-conscious about the camera. And then other times you have to work at it and take it an hour or 2 hours to actually get the person to.
It's also your mental state as well. How do you walk into that?
Yeah, it is partly that too. Yeah, I agree.
The fundamentals are so important. And I think I talk to students about that. That's the first thing I teach them. I never expect them to want to be photographers or filmmakers or artists. They can make a decision when they know the basic ingredients, what make up art, film, photography. And that's what's important. And I see that in your work.
It is, and that's why I have no problem switching from one to the other. Or, if I'm doing a little flyer for tomorrow's book signing, I know how to work with type as well and how it relates to the photograph and so on. And I do enjoy working in both areas still very much. In fact, the book I've designed cover, the publisher has changed the cover slightly, but which I was a bit disappointed with. But the rest of it is completely all designed by me and put together on my computer in Cork Express, which I still use for most design work.
Did you find you had more artistic license with graphic design or with your photography, or was it just the same?
No, it was the same. It was very much the same. I found it easier to earn money doing graphic design than I did doing photography. And I think that was essential, especially for quite a period I was a single parent. And I had to fit it in well with doing that because I could leave the studio at 3:00 to go and get my daughter from school or whatever.
Yeah.
So there was all sorts of other, those sort of considerations as well, which determine what you do and what you don't do. I mean, and also you get older as well. I mean, I don't think I would walk around the streets of West Belfast in quite the same way as I did when I was younger.
Yeah. Have you ever ventured into digital then?
Yeah, I do. I now use digital cameras. I love them. I really like them.
What are you playing with now then?
I've got a couple of Fujifilm X Pro 2s.
That seems to be the camera of the moment at the minute.
I've had them for a couple of years and I really like them. The X Pro 1 was really slow focus. So it was, I used to usually manual focus because the focus was just too ridiculously slow. But the 2s are really good cameras. Very good. I mean, the quality is astounding really compared with film.
It is, yeah. Do you find when you're scanning your negs, you realise the difference in quality?
I do, but unfortunately, I bought quite a few, probably 10 years ago now, an Imicon scanner, and it's so good. You can actually see that the grain is really sharp.
There's a uniqueness about old legs, but there's definitely a softness which you don't get in the digital, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, and there's a lot more mistakes as well, which sometimes are really can help.
So what's next project? Are you working on anything at all, apart from your obvious exhibitions and books? Is there something new coming on the horizon for you?
I've been doing pictures and will continue to. In fact, I'm just saying I've got to go up and do some in the East End, which I continue to do, walking the streets of the East End. And I'm still young enough to be able to, I'm not about young enough, but fit enough, I should say, to be able to spend a whole day walking and looking for pictures.
Yeah. Do you find it easier now, or is it harder now, photographing?
Much harder. There's no comparison.
Why? Why is that?
Partly because of the number of times people have photographed. People have got really bored with it and really, because everybody's photographed everything now. If you go to a gig, there'll be 1,000 photographs every time whoever's singing moves towards the microphone. Everybody's a photographer. Everybody's got cameras, but they're not photographers. I call that visual evidence. That's the collectors of visual evidence, which is not photography. That's only one aspect of photography. But it makes people much more wary of being photographed. And I think also the other thing what makes people wary of being photographed is things like superstars like David Beckham's obsession with image rights. They realise that there's money in imagery and they feel ripped off quite often if they're not being paid for it to be photographed, which I never paid anybody to ever photograph. I've never, ever paid anybody. Interestingly, I went, I think 5 years ago now, or no, a bit longer, 2016, I think it was, we went to Jamaica. I spent a few days in a couple of villages just walking around, talking to people and making portraits of people. That was like the old times. People were much more willing to be photographed and much more responsive when you started photographing them. And there was a much more vibrant conversation, if you know what I mean, between the photographer and the person they're photographing. Just like in the 1970s, it was. Now it's very, very difficult to make pictures. I mean, I often spend a day walking the street and don't take a single image. That's partly because as you get older, you don't bother wasting time when something's not working.
And the Jamaicans, you could see on your website, there's a gallery with Jamaicans on.
Yeah, there is, yeah.
What advice would you give yourself, your younger self now, when you look back and reflect? Would you change anything? Or?
Yeah, I would. I'd spend more time taking photographs and less time doing graphics, I think. I think photography is, at the end of the day, is the thing which really does make my heart beat, the most exciting bit. Yeah, I would have done that. And I think that was a career mistake, if you like. We can't do anything about it, but
but I'm sure the graphic designers paid the rent as well.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's what's important.
Yeah,
Syd, it's been wonderful. I must say you're the first photographer who I've spoken to on these podcasts who has stuck to his northern roots, even though he's ventured off to Ireland, Sydney,
Los Angeles,
hung out with the Clash and everything, has done this interview with a flat cap on.
Oh, yeah.
You could take the Yorkshireman out of a man, but you can't take the Yorkshireman out of a man. What am I talking about? I can't even get the saying right. But yeah, when I saw you initially, I thought he's a Yorkshire boy. You're talking to me with a flat cap on. And you know what? It just reminds me of being back up north, because it's interesting. Going back, my granddad always had a flat cap on, and I never thought anything of it. It was that. And then looking back on life, when we all associate northerners with flat caps on, and you're sitting there and you remind me of home, even though you're a Manchester United supporter.
So you're a Leeds supporter?
I'm from the northeast, mate. I'm a red and white.
Ah, Sunderland.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
at least you know where Sunderland is. Most people don't even know where it is.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know. I've been to Sunderland in more than one occasion. Carol, my wife, did an exhibition called Black British Style at the V&A, and that went to Sunderland. And I remember we went up there, and it was great, actually.
You don't have to say that because you're talking to me, though.
No, actually, we're just trying to work out how to go up to Newcastle, because I don't know whether you saw that wonderful installation by Hugh Locke at the Tate called The Procession.
Yeah.
It's going to the Baltic, and I would love to see it there, to see what it looks like in the Baltic.
The Baltic's fantastic.
Oh, no, it's brilliant.
On
brilliant.
The harbour, the quay area down in Newcastle on the quayside, it's beautiful.
It is.
It's much needed there, you know.
The Rock Against Racism, part of it went to the side gallery up there, and we went up for that too. That was great.
Yeah, the side. My childhood, my youth, the side gallery.
Yeah, it's brilliant. They've got a great collection.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Syd, it's been wonderful, and thank you. I've been wanting to talk to you for ages about you and your life and your connections to the world through your photography, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Brilliant. Take care.
Take care, mate. All the best.
Take care.
Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? If you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. Choose from hundreds of social casino style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.